Dr. Lisa Ordóñez has been Dean of UC San Diego's Rady School of Management since September 2019, leading its growth and securing nearly $20 million in funding. Under her leadership, Rady navigated the pandemic successfully, achieving record enrollments and expanding its world-renowned faculty. Named 2022 Businesswoman of the Year by the San Diego Business Journal, Dr. Ordóñez is a recognized expert in ethical behavior in organizations, with research cited in major media outlets. She serves on multiple boards and frequently delivers presentations on equity, diversity, and inclusion, leadership, and goal setting. Previously, she spent 25 years at the University of Arizona's Eller College of Management. Nana Tseng is Chief Procurement Officer and VP of External Manufacturing Operations at Onsemi, where she oversees procurement strategy and manages multi-billion-dollar spending across the supply chain. Before Onsemi, she was VP of Sales at Advanced Semiconductor Engineering. Her extensive experience in the semiconductor industry spans roles with fabless, IDM, OEM, and EMS companies. Nana was born in Taiwan, raised in Saudi Arabia, and educated in the U.S., holding an MBA from MIT Sloan and a degree from UC Berkeley. She is active in her community, serving on several advisory boards and as chair of Monty Jade West Science and Technology Association. Dr. Ordóñez and Nana both serve on Oceanside Perspectives Board of Directors. Keep listening to learn more about how authenticity cultivates self-awareness, strengthens your resilience, builds trust within your team, and contributes to long-term career success.
This is the most exciting session for today. We have two guest speakers, but the topics that I wanted to talk a little bit is authentic leadership, building trust and connection. So in connection with this morning's discussion about personal intelligence, cultural intelligence, and who am I, who are you, all those very complex questions, but also classic, long-lasting questions, people are still searching for answers. So I'm very excited to have the right speakers here, Dean Lisa, and as well as Nana. So let's welcome those speakers to our class. So our students have an assignment after this class for an intellectual journal. It's basically a reflection journal they have to write. So the question I posed for this journal was, think of your life as a house. Can you knock down the wall between the rooms and be the same person in each one? I would like to start with that one because I'm confused, I have to say. I think I know pretty well who I am, but sometimes I got confused. For example, when I'm in professional setting, I feel like, I'm a business leader in somewhat fashion. But when I at home doing gardening, I don't know if I feel like the same person. You might also have experience that going shopping for clothes, different type of clothes, right? Give you different spirit of yourself. So I'm curious about how do you approach this topic and what do you think? Nana.
Well, I was thinking when you say if we think of ourselves as a house, or what was it? Life as a house. I think it's normal that you do different things in different parts of the house, right? I mean, kitchen, you have a certain purpose there. Living room, laboratory, you have a certain, bedroom, right? So I think it's normal. And but you're right. As I actually, by the way, I want to say I really enjoy your questions because it actually forced me to think about my journey. It's actually surprising. I was thinking that I should be thinking more about this. I'm glad you assigned everybody this homework or project to really reflect. I think it's okay to be different because I was thinking about authentic, right? And it's about being consistent, but then being real, right? And the real fact is we are different. We have a different persona, right? When we are outside and when we're at home. So I think it's normal. I think it's really about what are some of the core values that you want to carry through, right? You're still you in each part of the house, but you may dress differently depending on what you're doing, but you are building this house, right? So it's still your house. So yeah, so that's kind of how my first thought. By the way, she didn't really give us this question beforehand. No. So that's
why I
my.
let you go first.
Yeah. So that's kind of my immediate response to that. Yeah.
How about you, Lisa?
So I think I'm the same person, but the people around me are different here at work than at home. Here at work, I feel like a mini celebrity sometimes, and it feels very odd because I am not the person that likes to be the center of attention. I do it for Rady because it's the role and it's what I need to do. And at home, they don't really care that I'm dean. So yeah, the kids don't listen, and I still clean the dishes. So I think I try to be that same person, but I have to remember, we were talking about this at lunch. I really want to create psychological safety, and I think of myself as just Lisa. But I've got to remember that the people around me don't see me just as Lisa, and they're guarded, or they don't want to tell me sometimes when they have a different opinion. And I have to realize that the people around me are different than at home, and I have to probe and ask questions and not just assume that they're going to be comfortable saying, yeah, no, that's a terrible idea. Why do you think of that? That's not going to happen. So, well, it happens once in a while, but not often, and not often enough. So I think I'm the same person, but people around me change.
How interesting, right? I see this like inside out. This is the opposite of outside, surrounded, made us somewhat different. Although I feel the answer probably is a little bit similar, is like we largely stay same as ourselves, right? Yeah, very interesting. You both have beautiful life stories. This time I will start with Lisa. So Lisa, would you mind tell us a little bit about yourself? And we all tell story define us. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what defines you.
Hard to say what defines me. That's a big question and probably too deep for today. But a little bit of my life story. So I have a very interesting background. I have my mother's family, and my mother is from Arkansas. We're migrant field workers, moved to California to work in the fields in California. My grandparents were from Mexico. They actually ran a migrant camp at one point and had a Mexican restaurant. Neither of my parents went to high school. My dad actually went for a year or two but didn't finish, and my mom never went to high school. So I call myself a double first generation. I don't know if that's a term, but I'm making it a term by using it. And so I kind of knew that I wanted to have an easier life. I never wanted to be rich, but I didn't want to be in the situation they found themselves in, which was very difficult, in the jobs that they were able to get. And so they were both frustrated academics. My mother loved school and desperately wanted to go to school. My dad, and she had to work for the family in the fields, and my dad had to work for the family restaurant. So both of them told me stories all the time about how they wished. My dad wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, and my mother wanted to be a nurse. And my dad became a mechanic, and my mom became a nurse's aide. So I felt like that was important, that I keep going to school, and I liked it. It's funny, this class is about emotional intelligence, because I am that classic, kind of dorky professor that's not very emotionally intelligent, so I'm still learning, so I probably should keep coming to these sessions.
All right, that's a commitment.
Okay, all right. But I liked school, and I could be alone for hours. Introverts, we can work for long periods of time by ourselves. And it was just natural. I got to UC Berkeley and started working with the professor, and one day she looked at me and said, "Hey, do you want to stay and get a PhD?" And it hadn't occurred to me, which was odd because I'm working in her lab with other PhD students. I just didn't see myself in that role, and thank goodness I said yes. And I'm still very close with her today. Doing my research, then I went to University of Arizona as an assistant professor. And, went through the whole 9 yards of imposter syndrome and, not sure, no one there looked like me, no one. In the whole of all the faculty, was the only Latino faculty member in the entire business school. I was the only one in my 20s when I got there. They were all 30, 40, 50 and above. So I felt like they made a mistake and they're gonna figure it out. But then, I stayed on, got promoted up through associate and full professor. And one day someone came in my office who was the vice dean of the school and said, "Do you want to be the next vice dean?" And I said, "Okay." And it's just kind of been my life that the next thing just keeps coming where people kind of introduce new ideas to me. And then I enjoyed being vice dean a lot, which is weird because I was still teaching and still doing my research. Being an administrator is a very different job, and many research faculty, it's not something they enjoy. But I found I enjoyed it. So when I had the opportunity to apply for this job here, it just fit. And it's been, now this is my 5th year. And I feel like these 5 years have been, hard, but incredibly rewarding and a lot of fun. And we have a lot more that we're going to get done. So I can see the next 5 years. I've got a vision for that, and it's basically growing this place and making it even greater than it already is.
A follow-up question.
Okay.
What do you think, if you were to name a few things of your personality, your character, or emotional intelligence that take you to the journey of success up to this point?
Absolutely, hands down, it's people who mentored me. Because my parents didn't know what to do. I mean, I look back, I don't know if you realize this, but the U.S. is going through really chaos right now with applying for something called the FAFSA for undergraduates to apply for financial aid. And it breaks my heart because there are going to be many, many low-income students who won't be able to make it to college because of this situation. But I know it was paper and pencil back then, and no one was helping me. Well, probably the counselors at school, and it was teachers who were reaching their hands out to me, and this professor who asked me to get a PhD all along. If it weren't for mentors, there's no way I'd be here.
Yeah, this mentorship topic is very interesting. We get, hopefully sometime today, talk about it. Nana, what about you?
Well, I came from a very international background, I would say. So I'm originally born in Taiwan. I actually grew up in Saudi Arabia and pretty much spent my childhood there, and then moved to the United States and stayed since high school until my graduate degree, and pretty much now settled back. But I actually worked also after my MBA, I went to Singapore and worked for 7 years, so traveled extensively in Southeast Asia. So it's in my DNA that I enjoy the travel, I enjoy the exposure and all the different cultural experience. I really feel that actually is also what differentiates me from a lot of my colleagues or peers because of that background, right? I think it's hard to repeat that. I can't even repeat that same experience with my kids, but it just happens to be that way, and I really felt blessed that I have those opportunities. So a little bit about my journey. My undergraduate degree, let's start with undergraduate. I also went to Cal. I actually was in finance and accounting, because as most Asian kids, I felt, well, math, right? I'm good at math, so let's stay with finance and accounting. It turns out that I have more people skills than I thought, So I did 2 years of that. I got bored and decided to get my MBA. And then with that, I basically pivoted after my MBA, went to management consulting, and that's how I found myself in Singapore, working for one of those management consulting firms, kind of doing strategy in Southeast Asia. But then after 2 years of doing that, I realized I also wanted to see how some of those strategies are getting implemented and what exactly are the impact, right? Because as a consultant, you work nights and days, you do a lot of analysis, your partner presents it, and then what do they do with it? Does it really work, right? So then I decided to move into industry. So that's kind of how my journey started into the semiconductor industry, is when I just picked an industry and I had the opportunity then to work in sales for a company called ASE. It was the company actually does a lot of manufacturing in Asia, so I was able to leverage my Asian culture and as well as my language skill to bridge, right, between our factory as well as our customers here in the United States. Then I got bored of doing sales. I felt a bit pigeonholed. and decided to reinvent myself and go into procurement. So now I'm the Chief Procurement Officer of Onsemi, which is a semiconductor company that specializes in intelligent power, intelligent sensing for the automotive and industrial market. So this journey, I think what I realized now, I'm thinking back, right, is that I'm very curious. So I'm always curious about what are my limits. So, and I'm always pleasantly surprised by myself of what I can set out to, when I set out to do something, what I can actually achieve or accomplish. So I think it's important to me, and that I'm not saying that works for everyone, that I continue to try different things and explore different things. So yeah, so that's kind of my story so far.
So curiosity, if you were to read it, sort of the most important thing, shaped who you are.
Yes.
Defined who you are today. Yeah. Give you a lot of opportunity to discover potential.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And curious about what other things you can do, what other impact you can make. Right?
Yeah. So mentorship and curiosity. Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. I think having both of you here is also very special because just from your life story, you can tell international background, the culture influences. So I'm curious about, we just had a culture intelligence module lecture this morning. I'm curious about how did culture shape you? Is there anything that particularly you took? I wanted to explain that the culture in a sense very broad. Like Nana, for example, where you grow up international background in different region, different countries, and then maybe even different industry and different position on both sides of the table, right? So all of those I consider as sort of a culture influence. And for Lisa, it's the same. You grow up as a sort of academia career, and then you start moving to leadership and management. And I bet even the Arizona University is very different from UC. Also, California and San Diego has its own culture. So I'm curious about your thoughts for how culture shaped you, and give us an example.
So I'm going to bring up another topic in culture that you might not think about. I grew up in poverty. I have probably one of the few people here that maybe now they're a card, but we had food stamps. Okay, thank you. And I think it shapes my view of the world. In fact, when I was interviewing for this job, the consultant asked a great question. He said, how comfortable are you with wealthy people? Because I am around billionaires on a daily, if not, weekly and sometimes daily basis. And I'm like, that was a great question, because I would have said, had he had asked that question a few years earlier, I would have said not very comfortable. But as Vice Dean, I started interacting with the wealthy donors at University of Arizona. But for me, just that assumption that people have that, and I try to be kind with those who may have even what they consider just average amount of money, that this is not everybody's reality, and we need to think and be careful what we assume. So for me, that is probably the culture that I grew up thinking about, was that. And also as a woman and as a Latina, there's conversations that people of color and different ethnic groups have among ourselves that other people just can't understand. And I'm in lots. My husband's African American, my family's Filipino, my stepfamily's Filipino, my daughter's transgender. Let's see, I can check how many boxes. I'm in these conversations, and I hear lots of different perspectives. And I think that's what helps me a lot, is I can see lots of different perspectives and hear from that person and see through their eyes, at the same time knowing that my perspective isn't everybody else's perspective.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess I agree totally with the perspective part, because having that international experience, it really gives you a very different perspective. But my context is a little bit different. I think for me, the being born in Asia, in Taiwan, kind of grew up in the Asian culture, You're taught, hard work, diligence, respect for the elderly, respect for the authority was kind of how you were brought up, right? And then growing up in Saudi Arabia, in fact, so it's a Muslim country, so all the foreigners were, basically you live in a ghetto. They put you in a compound, segregation, right? And you realize the power of religion and how it can really brainwash people, right? And also the danger of segregation and alienation, because the country basically don't allow foreigners to interact with the locals, because they're afraid that you're gonna give them the wrong ideas, right, and influence them too much. So at that young age, right, I realized, wow, this is, it's something which, now thinking back, it has a pretty strong impact in how I look at things. And then coming to America after living in Saudi Arabia, it's a major culture shock, right? And then as I go through my career in mostly an American kind of a company kind of environment, you're taught to stand for yourself, to be more assertive, to speak up, which then, of course, with my own upbringing as Asian, right? And of course, part of it is challenging authorities, which was not how I was taught. That kind of really brought up a lot of struggle in my early part of my career, right? How do I manage, right? Do I go into my boss room and tell them why I didn't get this position, or should I just wait for my boss to recognize how hard I've been working and therefore somehow they'll give me the promotion, right? And that's the Asian way. Asian way is you boss should know and you wait, right? But the American way is you go in and you say why you deserve it. So I'm generalizing, but yeah, that's how I was really trying to figure out what is the right way. So yeah, so I think it really, today, I feel I have a good balance. I know when I use my Asian culture to my advantage. I know when I need to use my American culture, right? And really be able to kind of flexibly kind of use them. In a way, it's a strategy, because then people can't predict you anymore. It's like, is she, where is she going to come from this time, right?
Which room are you in?
Yeah. She's knocked down all the walls.
Yeah. It's like, it's just, because there are days where I can be really, more Asian, and there are days when I can be very American, and they can't tell, right? And I think that's definitely a good strategy, actually.
Well, that's great. To lead to my next question, with given the complexity, right, of your life story, there's so many different, maybe multicultural, is the right word to describe that. Then what's your personal brand? And I mean, to your point, Nana, is like people don't know which room you are in, which room you're coming from, But so Nana is a brand. What is that? And how do you build a trust and a connection from there?
Yeah. So honestly, I have never quite understand why people are into personal brand until actually recently. Okay, because I
asked you the question. I'm sorry.
No. I meant recently, meaning about 2 months ago. I was at a mentorship program, and the topic was about building your personal brand. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, why do people? Because I guess, but now I get it. Okay, let me explain that. Initially I thought brand, it's about me, right? About building a reputation. But then I realized, no. Brand is not about your reputation. It's a bit more deliberate, right? You kind of have to, if you think about it, right? You have to kind of position yourself. You have to you wanted to influence how people perceive you, right? And of course, in a good way. That's the whole point, right? And so that you can differentiate yourself and you can stand out. Let's say in a business environment, why would the CEO decide to promote you or give you this role, right? So I was thinking, okay, there's definitely merit to that. But then I felt it was kind of kind of an oxymoron to this authenticity thing, right? Because then when I'm then being fake, am I just trying to be somebody who I'm not because I'm trying to build a brand? Because there's also a certain perception of what people are looking for. Right? And so do you try to fit into that, or how true can you be to yourself and yet be able to fit and create a brand that is attractive, right? So now I'm thinking, what is my brand? Yeah. So I think definitely what I just mentioned about my cultural background and the fact that I am, like you said, I've broke down all the walls, so I'm a bit kind of different, and I wouldn't say unpredictable, because that's actually not what I'm trying to brand myself, being unpredictable at all. But I wanted to say that I demonstrated. So basically what I think you do is you build upon your reputation and some of your strength, and really then kind of link that to what the company is really looking for. So let's say my company right now, Onsemi, we're doing a lot of transformation. And this fits me perfectly, because I'm the type of person that likes to go out and talk about reinventing myself, which is transformation. So I really play up this, I pivoted from sales to procurement, and I'm doing a darn good job right now. I can do it, and that's what the companies want, right? They're looking for people who, starting with a clean slate, open-minded, think out of the box. And that's kind of how I use my strength, right, to position myself in that, what the company needs. So I thought about, so I guess subconsciously I've been doing that, although I never really coined the term, yeah.
What you just explained, the sort of the process of how you get to, right, the answer for the personal brand, is exactly why we want to talk about this today. Because it's not a very easy answer, to begin with, especially when you're considering everything then in connection with the authenticity question, right? Yeah. I'm curious about how Lisa is going to tackle this.
Well, I never, that was an insight for me, that the difference between brand and reputation. I don't know if I can coin it so cleanly, but it's really someone that will get the job done. My favorite TV shows are those, kind of home improvement shows. I love seeing things get fixed. I like things being orderly. I like, providing people, opportunities to be their best. And shockingly, as even as the leader, I don't have to be the center of attention. I don't have to know it all. I get that work done through my team, because they're the ones that are really doing most of the hard work. So, but I try to project being someone who is reasonable, who's a partner that's going to it doesn't have to be about righty. One thing I've been doing since I've been here is really partnering with lots of different parts of campus, because, they have strengths that we don't have, and they have resources we don't have. So I'm trying to, get things done through other people, other organizations. But it's someone that you want to get a job done. I will get it done on budget, on time, and even better than you hope for.
That's great. I wanted to push a little bit on the second part of the question, how do you build a trust and a connection? The reason being because I think leaders are very much in the spotlight. You have people look up to you. People wanted to know what you want, which direction you're taking this organization or this company to. People need to know whether they want to work for you, to be bluntly, right? And so I think leaders in a lot of cases have nowhere to hide. If I'm just an individual contributor, I can just get my task done, But so as a leader, therefore the brand, the reputation matters. That's important also. How do you build a trust with your people or any people around you, as well as how do you connect from one to the other? What's your thought about that?
I don't know everything by any means, and I know that I have to trust the people that work with me, and they have to trust me. I have to sometimes hold my tongue if I'm disappointed, because if I show that I'm frustrated, they feel like they've let me down. But I have to learn how to stay calm and communicate, and be very clear as to what my expectations are. But when problems happen, my first thing I say is, let's diagnose what happened, not to point fingers, but to figure out how not to be here again. It's always about figuring this out. Let's find out what happened and let's make improvements. So it's always about that. And I really tried to be quiet. I learned this from another colleague, another dean. I try not to say my opinion first so that people feel like they can kind of add their comments. Because if I say we're going left, we're going left, unless somebody in the room is really, really serious about going right. So mostly it's just about, being connected to them, asking them questions, getting their viewpoint and using it, not just, and changing my mind and telling them so. Okay, I thought we were going left, but you make a good point about going right. Let's talk more about that. And if we go right, they see, oh, she listens. She can make changes. Or if I don't, research on voice and management shows that I need to make sure it's very clear. You made some really great points about going right, and I think in the future we may. But right now, this is the only way we can go for these reasons. Having that conversation and not just because I said doesn't work anymore. This top-down leadership is dead, or it should be. I think having a group of people that work together who feel empowered, who feel like they can speak up, but that's not always easy. I keep finding out almost every week how people did not tell me something that they had a different opinion, and it's like I have to breathe and realize that it's not fair for me to expect them to speak their mind, that it takes time and it takes people to trust, and I just keep working on that. So it takes time to build that trust, and sometimes it takes slowing down and asking questions and taking a breath before making the decision of moving on.
Mm-hmm. I will add maybe another layer to it before, Nana, you answer this question is, I know that your job requires you to negotiate. And on the negotiation table, right, one strategy is make it unpredictable. Mm-hmm. So the other side don't know where you're coming from, right, to your advantage. But is that the same approach when become a leader? Or do you adjust that?
I definitely, as a leader, I strive to be more consistent. I definitely want to be consistent. I'd like to keep my team on their toes, but that's after you've built a certain trust, and they love those drills, right? But yeah. So I would say no. That would not be how I would want to lead. Not with unpredictability. In fact, contrary to that, totally the opposite. I want to be consistent and persistent. It's not just being, and so if you communicated a certain goal, so the way I see it, similar to what Lisa is kind of saying, how you build consensus, how you empower your team, I would start with aligning where we want to go, right? So you kind of need to be 2-3 years ahead of what we need to achieve, right? And the rest of the team has to execute, and they live day to day, right? So they need to execute on a daily basis, but they need to know where we're heading. So once we are able to align on that, then you delegate. You let them drive. Like, okay, you're in charge of this, okay? Just make sure it gets there. You in charge of that, you make sure you get there, right? And then they're clear, and then it becomes fun, and it's a teamwork, right? So how we collaborate along the way to get there. So, but then you have to be consistently repeating this, and the goal has to be pretty much there, okay? It cannot all of a sudden change too much direction. But I think back to this trust, I think it does take time, and it's not, you have to earn it, okay? It needs to have some track record. You have to make people feel that you have their best interests in mind, okay? So, and that cannot be overnight, right? Because you have to kind of, first, definitely spending time to get to know them. So I do a lot of skip levels. I have about 400 people in my organization. I can't say I've met all of them one-on-one yet, but I definitely try to make sure at least my next level downs, I've talked to them in person, understand what their career aspirations and what keeps them up at night, and how I can help them. And that itself, just reaching out, is a big first step, right? And then and having that conversation, and they understand what you're thinking, also helps them to make sure they know your expectation and they can deliver. I think a lot of the frustration is when people don't know what you want and they work so hard and they miss the mark and then they get reprimanded or they didn't get what they think they deserve, right? So managing all of that upfront and spending time does build that teamwork and trust. And from going back to negotiation, I was just thinking when you said the question, like being unpredictable, I think definitely at the day of so negotiation is never a one-time shot, okay? It's a process, right? So usually I would start with having a nice lunch or dinner and not talk about business, just to get to know them, right? Or I want to know them more than they get to know me, that's for sure. But they don't know that, right?
Now they will know.
Now they know, oh my God, it's on the air.
Nana, you're not supposed to say it.
Oh no, now they don't want to go to lunch with me. But the idea is that you don't want to call on people only when you need their help, right? You want to build relationship. And in our industry, the business we do is a partnership. Really, it's a repeat business. There's a lot of repeat business. So you don't want to burn any bridges, right? So you have to kind of build that trust. Same thing, right, with the suppliers. How do you build that trust? So anyway, I don't want to take up all the time, but that's kind of how I want to say. Same thing with people. It takes time.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And also reinforced to hear that negotiation is actually based on the foundation of trust.
Yeah.
If there's no trust, there's no way you could reach to an agreement that you could live with.
Oftentimes, yes.
Yeah. So do you think, here's the question, do you think authenticity is critical to leadership?
Absolutely.
Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Well, I mean, it helps build trust, right? If you think someone is being fake or has another motive, you're always wondering, what is this person like? There's always that person, right, in the group that when they speak up, you're like, okay, they're saying this now, but what are they really trying to get out of this? You don't want to be that person where people are like, I want people to know when I'm asking you to do something that I really think it's what we need to do and why, to do it. So I think that's just, it's hard enough to do the work than to have all these other, concerns and what do they really want me to do? And are they trying to show that I'm not as competent? You want to build people up. Honestly, as much as I love this school and I want us to do better and better in terms of research and teaching and rankings and all that, honestly, I care more about the people who are working for this school and the students that are here rather than the progress we're making, because you take care of the people and the people will take care of the organization.
I love that because, I've noticed a lot of schools, they're all into this ranking, but I think if you have a team that's happy, that in itself will manifest, right, in how people review the program. I love that. The other thing I want to add on to Lisa is that I also see my role in the company because I'm just one of the organizations in the company, one of the functional teams, right? You need to show your team that you can fight for their benefit, right? Because a lot of times, there's a lot of, there's any organization, there's always people blaming other teams for not doing their job or not whatever, right? And you kind of have to be strong enough to hold your ground in front of executive staff, right? Why, first of all, be able to demonstrate what a great job your team has done. Because then they need visibility. The team needs visibility, then because that relates to compensation and a lot of things, right? So you need to be able to, your team needs to have faith and confidence in you that you will properly represent them in the executive team. So I see that as a big part of my role, is really to help them fight for their benefit and help them solve problems, right? Because there's, again, a lot of cross-functional things and they don't know, they may not know how to handle. Right, and you need to take one for the team sometimes. You just have to.
Yeah. We also talked about this morning that the feedback. I think feedback is directly related to authenticity, right? We also talk about self-awareness. There's internal self-awareness, how you think about yourself, also external, that how people perceive you. And then the feedback coming is kind of where you decided, you received feedback. I view feedback as a gift. But some gift you love it, some gift you don't care, some gift you hate it. And we also talk about if you don't like the gift, what do you do about it, right? And people has different. Some people donate them, some people hide them in the closet or whatever you do.
I'm a regifter all the way.
Oh, repurpose, right? Yeah. So here the question is, what do you do with feedback? As a leader, right? You shape yourself, your leadership approach, your leadership style, and then also your authenticity. So when you receive a feedback, how do you decide what to take, what not to take? How much you change? What do you change? Is there a pivotal moment in your leadership journey that because of one feedback, and it's changed you and it reshaped you? Pivotal moment.
Well, I'll just answer this one. Just because someone tells you something doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. And you have to triangulate. You have to listen and, ask questions of other people and, wait a minute, verify. I had a former dean at Arizona who had come up through a very different world as a leader. And, he basically told me, well, you're the leader, you tell them what to do, and that's how you should do this. And I just listened and I gave him his time. I didn't even need to triangulate that one. I knew that that's just not how things are anymore. That's how it worked and that's how he led, but that can't be my reality. So you've got to check it with your own gut. You got to triangulate with others, but just because someone gives you feedback doesn't mean you have to act on it, but you shouldn't ignore it, especially if you're hearing the same piece of feedback or advice. I like that. Adam Grant says, ask people for advice rather than feedback, right? Because feedback can feel kind of weighty, but you don't have to do anything with it, and especially don't have to do anything right now, but it might help you figure out where you need some support. Like, okay, I'm not really good at, organization or whatever the area is, so I'll get some help in that area. It may not be me that gets it done, but I can find others that can help me. But you don't have to always take it, but you should listen.
I actually don't have much more to add. I think you said it really well. I actually sometimes take the feedback and turn it into an ask. Like you kind of, I know. It's like I don't negotiate everything, but but it's like if somebody gives you a feedback, then and then sometimes I turn it into, well, can you help me with that? So you actually get more resource out of it. Like, you're right. So can I get some help from you, right? So there are ways to turn it into a positive.
I wanted to bring maybe AI to this conversation.
Oh, okay.
Right, we all somewhat utilize some part of AI these days. AI is supposed to be a useful tool for us. But I personally don't have a very clear outlook. Only some guesstimate, I guess maybe all of us are, is in terms of how would AI shape the world in the future. Would AI actually help or hurt authenticity?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, I think AI is a tool. Just like many tools that we've had, the internet has changed us, social media has changed us, and this is going to change us as well. I don't know that I don't really have an answer as to how it will affect authenticity. I do worry for young people growing up, though, will they ever learn how to write? I'm almost grateful I grew up in a day before there was this ability to put stuff in and get something beautiful written out. So,
but just to continue that, I think exactly, because when people they don't learn how to write, they don't know how to think, structure their thoughts, right? Which is in itself a very important skill, right? I think that you need in life, right? So I agree. I mean, if people rely too much, I think authenticity has to be the person. So I'm hoping the AI won't, and maybe I'm all wrong here, but that they're after all just a machine, a tool. And us adding that human touch is where the authenticity comes in, right? Where you can actually interact, and because our response to different people will be different. But maybe AI to you may be the same. I don't know, right? I'm saying I don't want to underestimate the power of AI, but I'm just hoping that because we're all different and we add a personal context to a lot of things we do and we say, that's how we're going to differentiate ourselves. So if everybody else is relying on AI to do their job, I hope I'm one of those that I use it as a tool, but then I add my personal authenticity to it to make it even more meaningful and powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like we head into the world, it may already happened, is, you have this like physical, emotional of us, right? Identity, Helen, Elisa, Nana. But there's also digital twin living somewhere.
Yeah.
And then the more that you feed into that information to it, how you train ChatGPT become your voice, for example. Also, I was thinking about, my dad still has his email, but although he passed away a few years ago, I wonder what happened to that email account, right? And you may have Facebook, you have those, examples. So there's another digital version of you living there. That's why it come to me as an authenticity question, it's just like, how would all this converge to a point, like which you is a true you? It's already confusing enough question. Like when I ask you, who are you? Now, like that's adding another dimension that we don't have to deal with in the past. Do you believe that emotional intelligence can be learned?
I do. I think so. For sure. I mean, I think, like I said, I started as in finance because I didn't want to deal with people. I didn't think I'm good at dealing with people, and I'm good with numbers. But I think as I put myself in front of people, you learn, and you gain more confidence, and you learn more tact. It's a lot of it is about knowing when you step forward and when you step back. I definitely think it can be learned, and I think it should be learned. Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read on emotional intelligence, but I think you're going to have to want to do it. It doesn't just happen. You've got to sometimes be quieter, listen, watch when, a reaction, and sometimes check back. A odd look on a staff member's face, and after the meeting, I might say, hey, I said something and I saw you kind of wince, what was that about? And if you can have that conversation, you can learn as well and say, oh, I'm sorry, that is not what I intended to say. I appreciate you telling me that, but it's work. Some people are just better at it, than others. But yeah, you can learn it, but you got to want to.
My last question before I open Q&A is, do you have a book to recommend when it come to this topic of either emotional intelligence, authenticity, or leadership?
I was going to say the Emotional Intelligence book by Daniel Goleman, right? And he actually has a sequel called Optimal, which I think you can apply it to, more of a corporate environment, which I thought was a good one too. So if you haven't read it, yeah.
I think the book on psychological safety is Amy Edmonton, because being able to create an environment in which people, do speak up, teams that have more psychological safety can have that freedom to learn, to communicate, and that's where you can grow in your emotional intelligence, I think. Great,
thanks for that recommendation. We're going to open for Q&A. And I may have to repeat your question just for the recording purposes. It's talking about different generation, especially a lot of research is based on Gen X. So do you view Gen Z have the same interpretation in terms of authenticity, leadership, emotional intelligence?
I was thinking at my organization, I do have a few Gen Zs, and I would say no. I think authenticity, no matter what generation, I think people appreciate that. I think how you deliver it, and the delivery of it may differ. because what they're used to and how they like to be communicated is a little bit different. But I think the authenticity itself, I think, carries true.
This is a great question, right? I wonder whether every generation feels the same way.
Yeah.
Or is that really Gen Z is like this very, very special one?
No, I think that's how things have evolved through history, right? I think it's true.
I think every generation has a different, is changing its view of leadership.
Yeah.
Just like me speaking to the older former dean who thought it's top down. Yeah. And I think it is becoming more of a leader is the one who gets us to go in the same direction, and hopefully the least painful way possible, by using the individuals and supporting them to succeed. I think leadership's changing also because we see a lot more women in leadership, and there is going to be a variety of approaches. The research does show, sometimes you think, oh, it'll just be better if we're all female leaders. No, actually, the research shows a mixture of men and women is really the best for a team, because you bring in different perspectives, and that's really important. But I think every generation have different norms and different views of what a leader does.
One thing is clearly, right, the younger generation has more resources that we never had before. Technology has brought so much, more empowerment to people. And now, of course, there's an AI waiting for all of us, yet to reveal what happens with that, right? So it is, I would say it's a classic question, but it's also timely, for us to asking ourselves now.
I actually think the younger generation are smarter than us when we were your age. That's for sure. I'm actually always impressed with, now I'm meeting people, a younger generation. What was I like at their age? And I realized all of you are a lot smarter than we were.
So the question is, it's an ever-changing world, right? Environment, customer demand, and you name it, everything is constantly changing. So what's your strategy to remain authenticity as a leader?
I think, to be honest, the authentic part that you need to maintain is that things do change. So your team needs to understand that sometimes you need to change course or adapt because things have changed. So just because we kind of mapped out this goal and it's not a marching order for 2 years straight, right? We need to adjust. So every year we review, right? And depending on the situation, like my industry, semiconductors, is so cyclical, right? Just last year, I'm trying to pull in more business. I'm trying to buy. Now I'm like, no, stop, right? So you have to be able to change quickly. So agility, right? Training your team to understand, to be agile and be able to change course is important. So that, I would say, is also authentic because things have changed, right? If you're talking about how culture may have changed in a company, and therefore all of a sudden we feel what we were doing or what we believed in as a team is no longer appreciated or valued, that is a little bit different. And I don't have a good answer for that right now, but because my answer would probably be, well, then you really have to ask, all of us have to ask ourselves, do we still fit into this organization? Because if you want to stay authentic to yourself and what you believe in, and what you think you can bring to the table, then you need to decide, are you willing, let's say a new CEO came in and now he values this. Or she. Yeah. Then, what do you do, right? Do you want it to adjust, or do you want to just move on to something else? And that's a valid thing to think about. And it's okay. You don't have to force yourself. Yeah.
Does I have anything to add?
Well, I think you do need to get comfortable with change. I like change because to me, change is hope. It's sometimes tiring, but I always think things can always get better. And so when there is kind of like, even with the pandemic, who knew? I mean, we had Zoom before. We had laptops at apartments before. Why didn't we do this where people can work at home, 2-3 days a week and still we would have never done it without the pandemic. And it's not what I want, simply because I would love for all of our staff. If you haven't noticed, the offices are quite empty if you're here during the week. Because I know as a leader, I can bark all I want about, well, you bought a place in Temecula when you took this job, so come on back every day, 8 to 5, or else would be, the building would be empty and I wouldn't have the staff. So it's not what I want, because I feel like there's so much we're losing by being, not all being here. But at the same time, I know that I enjoy flexibility, and so does everyone else. So I want that too. So I want them both. So for me, just getting used to change, now the question becomes, okay, how do we have both? How do we have flexibility as well as community and ability to learn from each other while people are not necessarily co-located 5 days a week like we had in the past? So it's just getting comfortable with change and finding the best you can out of every situation.
I would add maybe a little bit twist to that to answer the question. I feel like, because of everything is changing, that I should always be changing as well, as authentic to myself. That changing, twisted is growth. If I'm not open for change, I probably stop growing. Mm-hmm. So be true to yourself. Is there certain things that you wanted to change? Change is a good thing. Change is hope. And that's part of the authenticity as well. As a leader of the company, right, there's many layers. How do you make sure the message translated in an authentic way?
So at our company, we actually have this 8x6. First of all, 8 meaning a manager needs to supposedly manage at least 8 people to be called a manager. And 6 means the organization should not have more than 6 layers. CEO as level 1. So he himself took the whole layer. So that basically the idea is a flat organization. And exactly for what the challenge you were alluding to is how you make sure the culture and the message, right, the leadership is consistently trickled down. So the idea is really make it flatter, right? So that kind of helped with my job because my organization is relatively flat. Even though I have 400 people, I only have 3 layers underneath me, right? So it's not that hard to get to the third layer down. I definitely want to make sure my direct reports understand me very, very well. And I spend a lot of time with them because they have to be able to share that mindset or message down to their level, right? So who you actually keep in your kind of keep closely aligned with is important, right? Because you rely on them to trickle that down. So that's kind of how I kind of manage that. And of course, I do a lot of regular town halls. When I go to each of our site, I have these type of forums where people can ask questions. It's a lot of communication, yeah.
And for me, I meet with every faculty member once a year, half an hour. I meet with every staff group at least once during the year. I have different layers of senior leadership, and all of our managers get together at least once a quarter. The senior leadership, it's every 2 weeks. I meet with faculty in groups, assistant professors who often feel they don't have a voice because they don't have tenure. I have town halls. We just had our first time ever all staff retreat. So we took a half day, had some fun activities, had lots of food, had some educational activities, but a way to get to know them. I try to meet with the students at multiple points. So for me, it's having those opportunities to have those conversations and hear what's going on from the individuals. It's tough because my job is very external, but I can't forget that there's a group of people who need to understand why I'm making some decisions I'm making.
So food always makes things better.
Food's always makes alcohol even better, but that's, evenings.
Food is authenticity. Seeing is believing. Can you talk about your pivotal moment of culture shock that given your rich background that you've shared with us before? I have one.
Okay, yeah.
Please help us
All
out.
right. I remember that I was at Apple, and I was, again, the head of that group, and we traveled to Korea. Korean, has this culture of like you're drinking over the dinner table and then business is done. If you don't go there, it's never get done, right? But when I step in that company, I would not name the company, but one of the largest employer in the country. And then so you step in and the people mistaken by my senior manager next to me that he was the boss. You probably read some book that happens a lot. It's like, you have a female boss going out, but then you have a group of, people and they don't know who is the boss. I utilize that situation. And I keep it, when there's a hard question, I'm like, you got a boss here and he can answer you. And when at the dinner table, it's supposed to drink, I'm like, only boss drink. So I did not drink that night, just show a little bit courtesy that I probably drank a cup of soju or something. But other than that, I did not force myself to drink much. And I like that because I feel like, wow, this is something I can leverage in the future.
Well, I think the only thing I can think, there's lots of things where I felt like I was learning the cultures, lots of different, I'm in lots of different cultures, but I think going from an undergraduate program to graduate, and especially a PhD program, is very different than even a professional program that you're in. At undergrad, the culture is, get a grade, do your homework, and that's all you have to focus on. And I realized getting into a PhD program, no one cares about grades anymore. It's all what you can learn and understand and then communicate through your research. And so I had to really shift what I thought learning was about. And I didn't learn to learn until I started doing research, and still I kind of was in transition as an undergrad because I was working on research. But as a PhD student, I had to realize that it's now about what I learn and what I can show in my research. So it took me a while because that whole culture didn't exist, and many people don't really even understand. I feel like I'm translating for my own husband sometimes. People with PhDs are very different, because how we look at the world, how we look at problems. So I guess that's an example I can think of, but it took me a while to finally get it. But then it's freeing because it's more about truly understanding and truly learning, and I learned to like that. And now it helps me because I know I learned how to learn in a PhD program. There is nothing. Well, maybe there's some serious high level, engineering I'll never learn. But most topics I can teach myself what I need to know to be able to be proficient. So.
You are just super smart, Lisa. So.
No, actually, I am often not the smartest person in the room. I guarantee you. But I am absolutely okay with that. I don't say I don't have an ego, but I really don't care. I've got to that point where I don't care if you think I'm the smartest person, but I will outwork you. I will get the job done, and it doesn't matter then what you think about me.
Well, my experience is similar. I would say I was thinking of a similar experience as Helen's because of, the business context where my chief of staff is male. So, and I walk in, they assume he's the boss. But back to my strategy of being unpredictable, I actually make that into an opportunity, right? Because so I remember I was in Japan, and of course the Japanese, they're not really expecting a female boss, right? Although I have to say they're much more used to it now. So they adjusted quickly, but you can tell from their face, right? First of all, they felt really bad, right? That they made a mistake, and they started kind of, not knowing what to do, what to say, and it kind of put them on their toes, which I love, because then from a negotiation point of view, they already kind of like, okay, we made a mistake, right? And so I think it actually, like what Helen said, you can actually use it to your advantage.
That mistake's 5% lower on cost.
Exactly. You can't tell, but Helen, I am sure she used to be a very good negotiator. Yeah, Apple is well known for that.
There's another example I would have is, talk about a lot of Asia country experience, but I went to, I used to be assigned to negotiate the Apple headquarters that now they call Apple Park in Cupertino. And that was on the stone they put on the building. I negotiated like the top spender for a material. Stone is one of them. So I went to Italy, near Florence. And they know someone from Apple is coming, but they were shocked when I showed up, because that was a huge dollar amount of negotiation, whatever that might be. I had no idea to negotiate. I do supply chain for consumer electronics. Everything basically you make from the manufacturing, right? Precisely the spec of it, the warranty of it, the functionality of it, you can test it and everything. All of a sudden it comes to stone. Stone is what? Mother Nature. They all look different. What am I supposed to do? So I had no experience, but I asked my Apple retail store colleague in terms of what I can ask. So I had the list of wish list. And they're telling me that, Helen, you're never going to get this. It's just because you're dealing with different nature of the business. And I said, just give me whatever the full list looks like, so at least I know, right? Educate me. And then I bring that list basically to the Florence, to the meeting to Florence. And I asked them nicely. They had a culture shock. I also had a culture shock because this is two different, very different commodity. And I asked nicely. And when they say, no, Helen, that's not how we do business. Why? So after they explain themselves and I repeat, are you saying this and that? Does that sound right? And then gradually they compromised. So I would not say I got 100% of my wish list. I got 95%. And so that was one thing that, to your point, you asked excellent question, is not all the culture shock is bad. Some of them are really good. And also I would never pretend that I'm part of them. Yeah. Because I can never do that. I'm not to begin with. That's come to the authenticity part of it. If you're not, you're not. Be authentic to yourself. But how do you manage that situation, right? So that's another example. So the question is how to build a trust with your boss, especially when you're at the entry level. So other than hardworking, do a good job, is there something else we could do? Mm-hmm. Let's start with there.
Okay. Well, I think definitely you should self-promote, right? You should make your work known, because sometimes we don't know every day what you do, for sure. At least my level, let's say, assuming you're entry level, but you have to be strategic. First, make sure, for those projects your boss care about, if you run into him or her in the hallway, kind of be able to speak about it. Be ready to kind of say, that project, and I've been working on it. I just finished the analysis, and if you're interested, I can give you a summary. Take the opportunity to kind of promote yourself a little bit, what you did. The other thing is not just with your boss, but other teams, other cross-functional teams. Because when I hear my other colleagues from different part of the organization praising my team, that is a good impression. Mm-hmm. That's actually big, right? So usually the best compliment is when somebody else tells your boss, not you tell your boss, right? So that's another way. And definitely just kind of getting out there in the community, just to broaden, especially when you're early in your career, just broaden your horizon. You don't have to stick with that company, right? And just network, go to different programs. There's a lot of those networking events. I think those are always good as well.
And that's exactly right. And I'll just add, what's frustrating sometimes is people who do what they're told and nothing more. So, or not having your own ideas. So you want to be a self-starter. You don't want to get far way down and do something entirely different and come back and it's not what, whoever supervised you wanted. But coming with ideas, coming back and saying, I see how we've always done it this way. Here's another way. Would you like me to try this? Actually, I've got some new ideas on how to make it more efficient and maybe even a little bit different. But being that person that has ideas, but still gets the work done. I mean, someone who's always coming with ideas and not getting the work done, that's not so good. But having someone that can bring new ideas and a new way of looking at things and figuring things out on their own, because it's exhausting sometimes. It's like, I could have gotten this done in the time I took to explain how to do this to you. So don't, try things, experiment, get advice from all these other, see how people are doing it, find out who your counterpart is at another organization and see how they do things. I'm constantly talking to other deans. My people are talking to other people at their level and other business schools, because we're learning, and sometimes it's a little harder within your industry, so you probably have to reach outside of your industry. Academia is interesting. We share all kinds of best practices. It's kind of, it's kind of interesting. So I get to learn a lot from my colleagues. So I think that'd be something else. Is you want this person to be someone who's coming up with some new ideas.
We have like a minute left, and I'd like to reserve that for anyone who has not asked the question. Anyone? Yes. So maintaining the connection and trust, how do you give more critical, maybe negative feedback?
Well, so another book that I recommend to everyone, Crucial Conversations. It's really a psychological safety plus, but the first thing is that person needs to know that you both have the same goal, and they have to trust you. Because if you're going to have to give some negative feedback, and I've had to let people go, and I've had to do it in a way that was, as kind as I possibly could, but also as clear as I possibly could. So if they know that I respect them as a person and that we are going the same direction, they're more likely to hear that information, because we're all going in the same way. So they have to trust you. They have to know that you have their interest at heart.
And for me, if I start observing certain things that I feel I wanted to give feedback, I actually give it along the way. So I don't wait for example, we do have annual evaluations. I don't wait till that day and say, oh, here, I give them as I observe. Maybe 1 or 2 times I kind of just want to make sure that validate if this is indeed a gap. And then if I really feel like this is something I need to provide some feedback on, I'll start, taking the opportunity when that happens to say, hey, you know what, have you thought about doing it this way? Or, just to kind of get a feel why he or she may have chosen to approach it, right, or this way. And then you kind of start having that conversation, because people want to have a chance to explain, right? So I would build on that, is that I see that also again as a process.
Great. All right. I'd like to thank you, both of you, joining us, and we had a lot of discussion and a fun one as well. So let's give a round of applause. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Nana.
Thanks for listening to Oceanside Chat. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you liked it, please share our podcast and stay tuned for more episodes. We'll see you later.